I never believed in curses. Not until I took the night shift at Old Crow Antiques, a place where time seemed to stand still and shadows danced without light. They handed me a list of rules, strange, rigid rules that made no sense. But when I broke one, something woke up, something that had been waiting. When I first saw the old, crumbling facade of Old Crow Antiques, I thought it was just another quiet job, an easy way to make some cash while I sorted out my life. Nestled between a dilapidated pawn shop and a bakery that always smelled faintly of burnt sugar, the store seemed like any other forgotten relic in a dying town. Its windows were thick with dust, the faint glow of amber light barely pushing through the grime. The owner, a wiry old man named Mr. Hargrove, stood behind the counter, his sunken eyes peering over silver-rimmed glasses. He spoke with a voice like dry leaves rustling in a cold wind. "You'll be working the night shift, midnight to 6. Simple enough," he began, sliding a yellowed sheet of paper towards me. "But these rules, these are crucial. You follow them without question." I glanced at the list, expecting standard fare. Lock the doors, count the register, maybe check for broken glass. But what I saw sent a chill crawling down my spine. 1. Never answer the phone after 3 a.m., no matter how desperate the ringing sounds. 2. If you see a woman in a red dress browsing the jewelry section, do not speak to her. Keep your eyes down until she leaves. 3. At exactly 2:17 a.m., play the silver music box by the grandfather clock. Do not stop it until it finishes. 4. If a customer enters and asks for the timekeeper's journal, tell them we're out of stock, even if you know it's in the back. 5. Never, under any circumstances, step into the mirror room after 4 a.m. My first instinct was to laugh, but Mr. Hargrove's expression was a stark warning. Break the rules, and you won't survive the night. Do you understand? I nodded, a nervous chuckle dying in my throat. It was ridiculous. Just old superstition meant to scare the new guy. But I needed the job, desperately. So I swallowed my doubts, pocketed the list, and agreed. The first few nights were uneventful. The store was a sprawling maze of towering shelves, crowded with dusty porcelain dolls, tarnished silverware, cracked mirrors, and paintings whose eyes seemed to follow me as I moved. The faint smell of old wood and candle wax lingered in the air. My routine was simple: lock the doors at midnight, check the lights, and then settle behind the counter with a worn paperback novel. Occasionally, I'd glance at the clock, the minutes crawling by, but nothing ever seemed out of place. Until the 5th night. The phone rang at 3:15 a.m. I stared at it, my heart pounding. It rang again, louder this time, the shrill sound slicing through the oppressive silence. My instinct was to answer, to just make it stop, but I remembered the rule. Don't answer. The phone rang again, and again. Each ring felt like a claw scraping against my skull. Then the ringing stopped, only to be replaced by a voice, soft and pleading, crackling through the static. Please, please help me. It's so dark. I can't see." My hand trembled as I covered the receiver with cloth. The voice continued, desperate and distorted. "You promised. You said you'd save me." I backed away, the voice fading into a low, tortured whisper. But just as I turned, a soft, chilling breeze brushed against the back of my neck. I spun around. No one was there, but the door to the jewelry section was slightly ajar, the shadows deeper than before. A flicker of red caught my eye. A woman stood there, her back turned, her crimson dress a violent slash of color against the gray gloom. My heart raced. Rule 2. Do not speak to her. Keep your eyes down. I averted my gaze, forcing myself to breathe slowly. The sound of her heels clicked against the wooden floor. Closer and closer. The air grew heavy, thick with an unnatural chill. But I kept my head bowed, my hands gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. Suddenly, the clicking stopped. Silence pressed in around me. Was she gone? I dared a glance and froze. She stood mere inches away, her face pale, eyes like black voids boring into mine. Her lips parted, twisted into a ghastly smile. A faint whisper drifted from her. You see me, don't you? My legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor. When I looked up again, she was gone, but the store felt wrong. Shadows danced along the walls, and a distant, mournful hum echoed from somewhere deep within the aisles. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the list in my pocket, its crumpled edges digging into my palm. My gaze darted to the clock. 2:16 a.m. The silver music box. I nearly tore through the shelves, finding it tucked beside the ancient grandfather clock. Its silver surface was cold, almost biting. My fingers fumbled with the tiny latch, and I wound the key. The haunting melody began to play, a slow, melancholic tune that seemed to weave through the darkness, pushing back the cold. The oppressive air lightened, but only slightly. I stood there, watching the gears turn, listening to the fragile notes, until the music finally stopped. A faint sigh echoed through the store, and the shadows seemed to retreat. But I knew the night wasn't over. I stumbled back to the counter, gripping the list like a lifeline. Rule 4 flashed to my mind. The timekeeper's journal. No one had ever asked for it, yet. But my gaze drifted to the mirror room, the door half open, a sliver of darkness spilling out like a stain. The mirror room. Rule 5. Do not enter after 4 a.m. I glanced at the clock. 3:45. 15 minutes. Just 15 minutes, and I could lock the door and wait out the rest of the shift. But as I stared at the mirror room's dark doorway, a faint reflection seemed to shimmer within the glass. A figure. No, not just one. Dozens of pale, empty faces pressed against the glass, watching, waiting. My breathing quickened. I backed away, praying the minutes would hurry. But just as I turned, a faint, rhythmic tapping echoed through the store. It was coming from the front door. A figure stood outside, drenched in shadow, their hands slowly tapping against the glass. Let me in. I need the journal. My blood ran cold. Rule 4. I had to lie, but my voice was lost in my throat, frozen by terror. The figure's tapping grew louder, faster. The glass trembled with each strike. I clutched the list tighter, sweat dripping down my brow. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. And the tapping was becoming furious. And then a voice, a faint whisper from behind me. They're not outside. They're already in. The whisper felt like ice against the back of my neck. My entire body froze, every instinct screaming at me to run, but I couldn't move. My eyes darted to the glass door. The figure was gone. The furious tapping had stopped, but the store was suffocating, the air thick with a cold, damp heaviness. I gripped the list of rules so tightly that the paper tore beneath my fingers. My mind raced. I needed to focus, to remember what I had learned so far. The phone, the woman in red, the music box. I had followed the rules, but something was still wrong. The mirror room's door creaked, the faint groan of rusted hinges slicing through the silence. I turned, my stomach twisting. The door was now fully open, the darkness beyond its frame absolute. My gaze flicked to the clock. 3:58 a.m. 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes before the mirror room became a forbidden zone. But there was something else. Another sound. A faint rustling, like dry leaves scraping against each other. It was coming from the aisle filled with ancient books. My heart pounded in my chest. I should have stayed behind the counter, should have waited for the shift to end. But something compelled me to move forward. The books were arranged in a haphazard manner, their cracked leather spines leaning against each other. But one stood out, a thick, black leather journal with a faint etching of a clock on its cover. The timekeeper's journal. My breath caught. Rule 4. If anyone asks for it, I was to tell them it wasn't here. But why? What was so dangerous about this book? As my fingers hovered over it, I heard the faint whisper again, closer this time. Don't touch it. He's watching. I jerked back, stumbling against the bookshelf, a cascade of dust spilling into the air. My gaze darted around, but I saw no one. But I wasn't alone. I could feel it, a heavy, oppressive presence pressing in from all sides. My eyes flicked to the clock again. 4 a.m. The mirror room. I turned, but the door was no longer open. It was gone. A blank wall stood where the entrance should be. But that didn't make sense. I had just seen it. The store's dim lights flickered, shadows rippling across the shelves. My hand instinctively reached for the list, the torn paper barely holding together. My fingers brushed over the final rule again. Never enter the mirror room after 4 a.m. But it was gone, or had it moved? A sudden scraping sound echoed from the far end of the store. My eyes darted to the source. A tall, cracked mirror leaned against the far wall. But something was wrong with the reflection. My own image seemed wrong, twisted. My face was pale, eyes hollow, mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. I stepped back, my pulse pounding in my ears. But my reflection didn't move. It continued to grin, its hollow eyes locked onto mine. My breaths came faster, fogging the air before me. The reflection leaned forward, pressing its palms against the glass. Come closer, it whispered, its voice a hollow, distorted echo. No, I gasped, stumbling backward. The glass cracked, thin spider webs spreading from the figure's fingertips. Behind it, shadows shifted, other faces pressing against the darkness, their hollow eyes watching, their mouths murmuring in 1,000 whispered voices. My gaze shot to the clock. 4:03 a.m. I was trapped. Suddenly, the bell above the entrance chimed, a cold gust of wind sweeping through the store. My eyes snapped to the front door. It was wide open. Panic clawed on my chest. I never unlocked it. No one should have been able to enter. A figure stepped inside, tall, cloaked in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, its head turning as if scanning the room. But I didn't dare move. I barely breathed. Then it spoke, its voice a low, gravelly whisper. The journal. Where is the timekeeper's journal? My heart sank. I knew the answer. I had seen it moments before. But the rule 4. I had to lie. We don't have it. I managed to stutter, my voice barely more than a whisper. The figure's head turned towards me, and though I couldn't see its eyes, I felt its gaze pierce through me. The temperature in the room dropped, frost crackling across the glass counters. Lies, it hissed. the word twisting into a sharp, unnatural sound. It stepped closer, shadows spilling out from beneath its cloak, crawling across the floor like living tendrils. I backed away, my foot catching on an old wooden chest, and I fell hard, pain lancing up my arm. The figure's shadows reached for me, cold and grasping, wrapping around my legs. I struggled, kicking, but they tightened like 1,000 frozen fingers. Please, please don't. I choked, the air growing thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. Suddenly, the music box's haunting melody began to play again, soft, distant, but growing louder. The shadows recoiled, writhing away from me. The cloaked figure's head snapped towards the sound, a low growl rumbling from beneath the hood. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled to my feet and ran, weaving through the narrow aisles, my eyes locked on the counter where the music box sat, its tiny gears spinning on their own. But it was impossible. I hadn't wound it. The figure's footsteps were close behind, its growls growing louder, furious. The temperature plummeted further, frost spreading across the shelves, glass cracking under the icy pressure. My hand slammed against the counter, and I grabbed the music box. The melody was desperate now, faster, almost panicked. I didn't know what to do, but instinct took over. I wounded again, the melody slowing to a soft, mournful tune. A scream, a terrible, inhuman wail, echoed through the store. The shadows recoiled, the frost shattering like glass, and a cloaked figure staggered, its form distorting, flickering like a dying flame. "You cannot keep it from me forever," it shrieked, before its body dissolved into a thick, black mist that surged towards the door, vanishing into the night. Silence settled over the store, heavy and suffocating. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor, the music box's slow, fading melody the only sound in the darkness. But as the last note died, I heard it, a faint whisper from behind me. "Thank you for playing my song." I turned, but nothing was there, only the endless shadows of old crow antiques. My gaze drifted to the timekeeper's journal, still resting on the shelf, untouched. I knew now that it was more than just an old book, and I knew, with a sick certainty, that whatever haunted this store wasn't finished with me. The clock struck 4:30. I still had an hour and a half left in my shift, and something told me the worst was yet to come. The minutes stretched into an eternity. I sat behind the counter, clutching the silver music box, its cold metal biting into my palm. The air was thick with a damp, musty smell, and the silence was so absolute that I could hear the faint creaking of the old wooden shelves as they settled. But I didn't dare relax. The store was quiet now, too quiet. After the cloaked figure had vanished, after that terrible, soul-rending scream, I expected the tension to ease, but the darkness seemed to cling even tighter, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. My eyes flicked to the list of rules, the crumpled, torn paper lying on the counter. Each rule seemed burned into my mind now, yet their purpose remained a mystery. I knew they were meant to protect me, but from what? And why did it feel like the rules themselves were changing? I forced myself to stand, my legs weak and unsteady. The clock read 4:31 a.m. Only an hour and a half left. I could survive. I just needed to stay focused. But as I steadied my breathing, I noticed something off. The reflection in the glass display case was distorted. No, not distorted. Moving. A faint, rippling motion passed across the glass, as though something were shifting beneath its surface. My pulse quickened. I leaned closer, but the warped image twisted, a pale face pressing against the glass from the other side, its mouth open in a silent scream. I stumbled back, a choked cry escaping my lips. But the face melted away, the glass returning to its ordinary, dust-streaked reflection. I was losing my mind. This job was breaking me. But then the bell above the entrance chimed, the door creaking open. My head snapped towards it, but the door was still closed. Locked. I watched in horror as a cold breeze swept through the store, rustling the pages of old books, stirring the dust. Something was here. I could feel it. A faint whispering, a chorus of overlapping voices, seemed to drift from the shadowed corners of the store. My gaze darted to the mirror room. The door was back, closed but solid, as though it had never vanished. I didn't dare go near it. My eyes caught the timekeeper's journal again, resting quietly on the shelf. I hadn't touched it, but its presence felt like a weight pressing down on me. I didn't understand why it was so dangerous. Why was I forbidden from letting anyone have it? Suddenly, the phone rang. My heart stopped. 4:35 a.m. It shouldn't ring, not now. Rule 1 was clear. Never answer after 3 a.m. But the phone continued to ring, each shrill tone slicing through the darkness. I stared at it, frozen. It shouldn't ring. I had followed the rule. So why was it? Crash. One of the shelves near the back of the store toppled over, old trinkets and porcelain dolls shattering against the floor. I spun around, cold sweat slick on my forehead. The darkness beyond the aisle seemed to writhe, thick and pulsing. The phone rang louder now, each ring growing more desperate. I covered my ears, trying to block it out, but it was relentless. And then I heard again, a voice whispering through the static. I can't see. Please help me. You promised you'd help. I stumbled backwards, my eyes darting to the front door, but it remained firmly shut. The clock read 4:37. The phone continued to ring, the voice growing louder. You said you wouldn't leave me in the dark. No, please, I whispered, backing into the counter. I wanted to run, to escape, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. The voice grew distorted, angry. Liar. Traitor. You left me here. The lights flickered wildly, the bulbs buzzing, shadows shifting and twisting. The whispering grew into a cacophony, countless voices screaming and wailing. The darkness pulsed, surging towards me, and for a moment I thought it would swallow me whole. Then, as suddenly as it began, the phone went silent. The store was plunged into an oppressive, suffocating stillness. But something had changed. The darkness was heavier now, pressing in from all sides. And the clock, its hands were moving backwards, the second hand spinning wildly. Panic clawed at my chest. I grabbed the music box, winding it desperately. The haunting melody spilled out, slow and mournful. But instead of comfort, it seemed to twist into something discordant, like a lullaby gone wrong. And then I saw her, the woman in the red dress, standing by the jewelry section. Her back was to me, her crimson gown fluttering as though caught in a breeze that I couldn't feel. I averted my gaze, remembering the rule. Don't look at her. Don't speak to her. But I could hear her moving, the slow click of her heels against the wooden floor, the faint rustle of her dress. My heart thundered against my ribs. I clenched my eyes shut, gripping the counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then her voice, soft and delicate, drifted towards me. You shouldn't be here. she whispered. Not tonight. The lights flickered again, the shadows coiling around her. I didn't dare speak. I didn't dare look. But her presence grew closer, the scent of roses and decay thick in the air. Her voice was beside me now, a faint, cold breath against my ear. They won't let you leave, not with the journal. Suddenly, the bell above the door chimed again, and the woman's presence vanished. The suffocating pressure lifted slightly, and I dared open my eyes. The store was still, silent, but the front door was wide open, the cold, misty darkness beyond beckoning. I wanted to run, to escape, but I couldn't leave the journal. It was a rule. I had to keep it hidden. But why? I grabbed it, the thick, leather-bound cover cold against my palm. As soon as I touched it, a faint warmth spread through my hand, and the store seemed to shift. The shadows recoiled, and the oppressive air lightened. But then a whisper, sharp and urgent, filled the room. Don't let them take it. Not again. A distant echo of footsteps thundered against the wooden floor, growing louder. Something was coming. Something that wanted the journal. The door slammed shut, the lights buzzing and flickering wildly. I clutched the journal to my chest, my back pressed against the counter. And then, from the mirror room, a slow, deliberate knocking began. Knock, knock, knock. I stared, dread pooling in my stomach. The knocking continued, steady, rhythmic. But the door was still shut, the darkness beyond it shifting like a living thing. Knock, knock, knock. The clock read 4:45 a.m., 15 minutes. Just 15 more minutes. But the knocking wouldn't stop. I needed to escape. I needed to survive. But I was trapped, caught between the endless darkness of the store and whatever was trying to claw its way through the mirror room. Suddenly, a voice, calm and cold, drifted through the store. You have something that doesn't belong to you. My heart plummeted. I didn't dare look up. The voice was closer now, a shadow falling across the counter. Give it to me. The journal burned in my hands, its warmth turning to a searing heat. My vision blurred, the shadows thickening. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. And then I realized I was no longer alone. The store was full, filled with pale, twisted faces, empty eyes watching, their mouths murmuring in 1,000 tortured whispers. You can't keep it, they whispered, their voices rising. It belongs to him. And then the knocking stopped. The store was suffocating. The shadows were no longer just shadows. They were alive, writhing and pulsing like a swarm of insects. The pale faces twisted within them, their empty eyes fixed on me, mouths stretched open in silent screams. Their whispers clawed at my mind, a maddening cacophony that threatened to shatter me. You can't keep it. It belongs to him. The journal in my hand seared against my skin, its leather cover hot to the touch. I wanted to drop it, to throw it away, but my fingers refused to let go. Somehow, I knew that letting it go would be far worse. The knocking on the mirror room door had stopped, but the silence was worse, thick and oppressive, pressing against me like a cold, wet blanket. And then I felt it. The air seemed to ripple, a chill racing up my spine. My gaze darted to the mirror room. The door was gone again, vanished into the darkness of the wall. But the shadows there seemed to pulse, like a wound festering in the dim light. I have to leave, I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew the store wouldn't let me. The front door was shut, the lock twisted and warped as though melted. The windows were thick with a frost that spread like claw marks. I stumbled backwards, clutching the journal, my gaze darting to the list of rules. But the paper was blank. Every rule had faded, the yellowed sheet now an empty, fragile scrap. Panic twisted in my chest. The rules were my lifeline. Without them, I was blind, helpless. The shadows surged closer, the whispers growing louder, and through the madness, a single, low voice rose above the rest, a voice deep and commanding. Bring it to me. The store seemed to shudder, the shelves rattling, glass cracking. My legs moved on their own, dragging me towards the center aisle. I struggled, tried to stop, but it was like wading through a freezing, suffocating fog. And then I saw him. A figure stood at the far end of the aisle, tall and cloaked, his face hidden beneath a hood of twisting shadows. The darkness seemed to bleed from him, spreading across the floor like ink. His hand extended, long, clawed fingers reaching out. The journal belongs to me. No, I screamed, stumbling backwards, but my voice was swallowed by the shadows. Suddenly, the store twisted around me. The aisle stretched and warped, shelves bending and twisting like gnarled trees. The lights flickered violently, and the air grew frigid. I turned to run, but the floor buckled beneath me, and I fell hard, the journal slipping from my grasp and skidding across the wooden boards. It stopped near a shattered mirror, and in its reflection, I saw them. Countless pale faces, their empty eyes staring at me, their hands pressed against the glass, desperate. You said you would save us, they whispered, their voices rising into a wail. I don't know what you want, I screamed, crawling toward the journal. I don't understand. But as my fingers touched the book, a cold, bony hand grabbed my wrist. I looked up and saw her, the woman in the red dress, her face pale and streaked with black tears. Her hollow eyes bore into mine. You lied to us, she whispered, her voice full of despair. He took everything, trapped us here. I tried to pull away, but her grip tightened, her nails digging into my skin. The shadows coiled around her, twisting through her crimson gown like dark tendrils. Who did this? I gasped. Her lips trembled. The timekeeper. The store shook violently, the shelves collapsing, porcelain dolls shattering against the floor. The whispers became screams, the twisted faces pressing against every reflective surface. Mirrors, glass, even the dusty display cases. The timekeeper. That's who they feared. That's who wanted the journal. But what was he? My gaze shot to the figure at the end of the aisle. The darkness had thickened around him, his form growing taller, more monstrous, his fingers elongating into sharp, clawed talons. You cannot escape, little thief. His voice echoed, twisted with rage. You have what belongs to me. The journal pulsed beneath my hand, the searing heat burning through my palm. Pain flared, and I jerked my hand away, but a faint, ghostly light seeped from the edges of the cover, like dying embers. My mind raced. I didn't know what the journal was, but it was connected to this madness, to the souls trapped in the mirrors, to the darkness that suffocated the store. And somehow it was also the key. The woman's hand on my wrist grew colder, her grip loosening, her face twisted with anguish. You must destroy it before he takes it. Destroy it. I gasped, staring at the journal. Yes, she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Only then will we be free. The timekeeper roared, the shadows surging towards me, the air thick with frost. I grabbed the journal, ignoring the searing pain, and stumbled towards the counter, my gaze locking onto the silver music box. I wound it frantically, the haunting melody spilling out. But it was warped now, distorted, twisted. Yet the shadows seemed to recoil slightly, their advance slowing. "You cannot end it," the timekeeper bellowed, his voice thunderous, shaking the walls. "I am eternal. I am time." The music box's melody warped further, each note a desperate, discordant cry. But I didn't have a plan. I didn't know how to destroy the journal. My eyes darted to the shattered mirror, the pale faces still watching, their silent screams pleading with me. The shadows were almost upon me. The air was freezing, my breath misting before me. But then I saw it, the flickering light within the journal's edges. A faint, dying ember. Fire. My hands trembled, but I forced them to move. I grabbed an old oil lantern from the counter, its glass cracked but still filled with a thick, greasy fuel. I slammed it against the counter, the oil spilling across the wood. The timekeeper's figure twisted with rage, his clawed hands reaching for me. "No!" I snatched an old, silver lighter from the drawer, my thumb sparking the tiny flame. I didn't hesitate. I dropped it. The oil ignited with a furious whoosh, flames licking up the counter, spilling over the journal. The darkness screamed, a terrible, agonized wail that seemed to shake the very air. The timekeeper's form twisted, thrashing as the flames spread, the pale faces in the mirrors wailing in a chorus of anguish. The journal's cover blackened, the ghostly light within flaring brightly, a searing white glow that burned through the darkness. And then, with a final, shuddering cry, the timekeeper's form shattered, exploding into a cloud of ash and shadow, which was sucked violently into the burning pages of the journal. The store trembled, the mirrors cracking, the faces within them fading, their desperate wails turning to faint, relieved sighs. The flames spread, the shelves catching fire, smoke curling towards the ceiling. I stumbled backwards, choking on the thick, acrid smoke. But as the fire consumed the journal, I saw them, the soul's faint, ghostly figures drifting from the mirrors, their hollow eyes now filled with a soft, peaceful light. "Thank you," they whispered, their voices fading like a distant breeze. The front door burst open, the cold night air rushing in. I didn't need any further encouragement. I ran, stumbling through the smoke and flames, the roar of the fire behind me. I burst onto the empty street, gasping, coughing, watching as Old Crow Antiques was swallowed by the raging inferno. The oppressive darkness was gone. The whispers had fallen silent. But as I stared into the flames, one final voice seemed to drift on the wind, soft, cold, and distant. "You destroyed the journal, but time cannot be burned away." And for just a moment, in the flickering light of the burning store, I saw a tall, cloaked figure watching me from the shadows. The cold wind bit at my face as I stumbled away from the burning store, my chest heaving with every desperate breath. Flames clawed at the night sky, their fiery tongues licking the air, and thick, black smoke churned upward, swirling into the darkness. I should have felt relieved, freed even, but I didn't, because I saw him. Even as Old Crow Antiques burned, the cloaked figure had stood there, watching from the shadows, his pale, featureless face hidden beneath the swirling darkness of his hood. And as I ran, that final whisper lingered in my mind, chilling me to my core. "You destroyed the journal, but time cannot be burned away." I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of town, my legs trembling, lungs burning. The streets were deserted, the cold mist pressing in from the forest, and the quiet felt wrong. Too empty, too dead. No sirens, no shouting, just silence. My mind raced, replaying everything that had happened. The cursed rules, the souls in the mirrors, the timekeeper, a being who claimed to be time itself. I had burned the journal, destroyed the anchor that held his darkness in the store. So why did it feel like I hadn't escaped? I forced myself to calm down, leaning against a cold, damp lamppost. I needed to think, to understand. But the whispers wouldn't leave me, their faint echoes brushing against the edges of my mind. You said you would save us. You lied. Time cannot be burned away. I rubbed my temples, trying to clear the haze of panic. Maybe it was over. Maybe the journal had been the source of the curse. But even as I tried to convince myself, a nagging dread gnawed at me. The rules were gone. The store was gone. But the darkness hadn't vanished. And then I heard it. The faint, distant chime of a bell. The same familiar, rusty jingle of the bell that hung above the entrance of Old Crow Antiques. My heart twisted. That was impossible. The store was burning, destroyed. But the bell chimed again, louder this time, closer. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the mist-shrouded street. Empty windows of darkened shops stared back, the fog curling around them like pale fingers. But then I saw it, a faint, warm light spilling out from a shop window just down the street. No, it couldn't be. But there it was, the unmistakable wooden sign of Old Crow Antiques, swaying gently in the cold wind, its twisted letters creaking softly. The store stood as it always had, dark and foreboding, the light inside flickering with a warm, golden glow. My blood ran cold. I had burned it. I saw it collapse in flames. But here it was, untouched, whole, waiting. The bell chimed again, and the front door creaked open, a soft, chilling breeze spilling out, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and old, rotting wood. Come in, a familiar, hollow voice whispered, drifting out from the darkness. Your shift isn't over. No, I whispered, stumbling backward. But the mist seemed to thicken, pressing in, and I realized with horror that the street stretched away from me, growing longer, the distant buildings warping and twisting. I turned to run, but the mist curled around me, freezing against my skin. My feet moved, but each step seemed to take me nowhere, the ground shifting beneath me. I was trapped, caught in an endless fog. You can't leave, the voice whispered, calm but edged with a cruel hunger. Time is not a prison you can escape. Suddenly, the fog pulled back, and I was standing at the entrance of Old Crow Antiques once more. The warm, golden light spilled out onto the cobblestones, and the bell above the door jangled softly, though there was no wind. My hand shook, cold sweat slick on my brow. I stepped back, but the mist closed in, forcing me forward. I wanted to scream, to fight, but my voice was swallowed by the dense, suffocating air. The door opened wider, darkness stretching beyond the warm light, an empty, yawning void that seemed to ripple like water. And then, in the depths of that darkness, I saw them, the pale faces, their empty eyes watching, their mouths whispering. You can't leave. You have to follow the rules. It's not over. A cold, bony hand gripped my shoulder. I turned, my breath freezing in my chest. It was the woman in the red dress, her face pale, her hollow eyes dark, and endless. But there was something different. No malice, only sorrow. "You shouldn't have come here tonight," she whispered, her voice tinged with regret. I didn't have a choice." I cried, desperation twisting my voice. "There is always a choice," she murmured, her cold fingers tightening. "But now you belong to him." The mist surged, the cold biting deeper, and her form dissolved into a cloud of black, swirling ash, her empty eyes the last to fade. I staggered forward, stumbling through the open door of the store. But the store had changed. The aisles stretched endlessly, shelves twisted and warped, mirrors lining the walls, each one filled with faces, hollow, pale, watching, their whispers rising and falling like a sick, twisted choir. The clock behind the counter spun wildly, its hands racing backward. The list of rules was back on the counter, but the words had changed. New rules written in jagged, bleeding script. Rule 1, you are never allowed to leave. Rule 2, time is not your ally. Rule 3, never break a promise to the lost souls. Rule 4, the timekeeper always watches. And beneath the list, a final line. Rule 5, your shift is eternal. A heavy, oppressive weight pressed down on me, the cold sinking into my bones. The music box began to play again, soft, twisted, and haunting. And from the darkness beyond the twisting aisles, I saw him, the timekeeper, his cloaked form towering, his pale, hollow face staring through the darkness. "You can't escape time," he whispered, his voice a slow, thunderous rumble. "And now, time is all you have." The darkness surged towards me, the faces in the mirrors crying out, the whispers clawing at my mind. I tried to run, but the aisles twisted, stretched, trapping me in an endless maze. And as the darkness swallowed me, I realized the horrible truth. I was never meant to survive the night. I was always meant to stay, to become just another lost soul in Old Crow Antiques. And as the darkness closed in, as the faces of the trapped souls pressed against the mirrors, I felt the cold, suffocating embrace of eternity. Because time doesn't end. Not here. Not for me. Not ever.